All right, we are 48 hours from kickoff, which means it is time for key matchups, player matchups, and a 3-2-1 lift off into this preview with 3 keys to victory, 2 key players, and 1 very bold prediction. Locked on Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler. Excuse the look. I'm getting some new glasses, so I had to put in my contacts for the first time in a while. Regardless of my appearance, I am glad y'all are here. We have a great show for you today, previewing and getting into the actual most important matchups for Texas A&M, South Carolina, this Saturday night, 7:30 in Willie B. But first and foremost, I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we are a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. You can start the season with a big return right now with new customers placing a $5 bet. You will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get it started. Listen, you guys know, speaking of bets, I love looking at some of the angles that Vegas provides and sharps and all of those things because Vegas is rarely wrong. And a lot of times, as you've seen throughout the season, they're starting to catch up on South Carolina, but a little bit later than they probably would have liked because there's been tremendous value in the Gamecocks. There's tremendous value in the Gamecocks this weekend. Now, I was on radio today with Alyssa Lang and Chris Doring, humble brag, and I flat out said to them, because they were asking about the upset and what do I think the chances are, blah, blah, blah. I wish people would shut up about it. Like, I wish people would stop talking about it because the lower the expectation and the bar is, I feel like for this program in general, the better they usually perform. And we don't feel let down by anything like that. Also, A&M is coming into this game off a massive emotional high and win against a team that they view as a rival that, LSU probably doesn't. At home, now they got to go on the road in a hostile environment. This is the most difficult environment they'll have played in all year. It's the best defense they're going to play all year. And obviously South Carolina coming off a bye. I wish people would stop jumping on this bandwagon as an upset pick because that part is making me nervous. The other thing that's making me nervous, I mentioned yesterday, South Carolina has been in this spot already once before this season against Ole Miss, coming off a bye at home in a game with a ton of juice, literally, and a revenge factor. They played themselves out of that game in the first 10 minutes. I think this coaching staff learned its lesson. I still believe this offense is turning the corner. They're getting a little bit healthier there too. You get Jared Brown back this week as well. But there are several key matchups that I think are most important. And I'm not just talking about winning the turnover battle or anything like that. I'm talking about specific players versus other players for South Carolina versus Texas A&M. Let's get started with what I'm going to dub as a 3-2-1 in this. We're going to have 3 keys to victory, 2 key players, and 1 bold prediction. And that will be the show for today. Now, listen, first and foremost, we've talked about this all week. South Carolina's offensive line versus A&M's defensive line. That is the biggest concern here. That and Lenore Sellers potentially turning the football over. But the concern there stems from the concern you have with the offensive line. We know the numbers. They're not good. Statistically, it has been very, very bad. Here's what I think Elko will probably do because he's a smart person, and it's what most of you would probably do as well if you were coaching A&M. I'm putting Nick Scorton on Josiah Thompson all day, across from him all day. Nick Scorton is a beast that's going to be a top 15 pick in next year's NFL draft. He will be a surefire first rounder. Josiah Thompson is a true freshman. He is a very, very highly rated and heralded true freshman. But as is the case with a lot of true freshmen, especially at that position, throughout the season, he has really, really struggled. Really, really struggled. You talk about some of the numbers from pressures allowed on the season, sacks allowed. He leads the team in sacks allowed, him and Rashawn Lee, both allowing 5 total this season. Total pressures allowed on the year, Again, he leads the team with 26. Total hurries that he's allowed, 18. That also leads the team by more than six more than anyone else on that offensive line. This is PFF grades, which listen, I don't know how they came up with that number. It's a lot like ESPN FPI. You could tell me whatever you want and lie to my face about how you came up with the number. I would probably believe you. I do know that the lower the number is, the worse it is. And if you put on the tape, it has not been great all season long. His grade from pass blocking this season, Josiah Thompson, 46.0 in a true pass set, which South Carolina has started to go into more over the last 2 games and had success, 36.7. Those are horribly, horribly low numbers. But here's the deal. One thing that we are not talking enough about the resumes coming into this game, and I alluded to it yesterday. A&M hasn't played hardly anyone. They definitely haven't played anything close to the caliber of a schedule that South Carolina has played. They have 8 games that are bookended with an LSU game at home and that Notre Dame game at home to start the season. Both those games were at home. The LSU game was very clear that they did no prep for Marcel Reed. So tip the cap to A&M's coaching staff for realizing that they could probably take advantage of that and have the element of surprise, whatever. It worked out. Like, they outcoached LSU. I don't think that South Carolina, at the very least, is going to be unprepared for Marcel Reed, right? I also said this yesterday that A&M's entire identity as an offense is running the football. They run the ball in 64% of their plays. That's nearly the most in the SEC. Now, you have seen South Carolina drop back and throw the ball more than they did in the first couple weeks, and it's worked out well. I think they're going to have to do that this weekend. If they do, you have got to figure out a way, whether it is double teaming or figuring something out, bringing a tight end over to chip. Josiah Thompson cannot be left on an island with Nick Scorton because it's going to end very, very poorly. Now, back to what I was saying about like the resumes coming in. This is something I saw on Action Network. They do a great job with kind of deep dives into the numbers. Because a lot of times, I've been saying this over and over, A&M's getting patted on the back all week. And that win was in front of a national televised audience in a big, top 15 matchup. Not a rivalry game, but not a rivalry game. They won in dramatic fashion. Everybody's watching it, right? The atmosphere was incredible. You had the eyes of the nation on you and pretty much only you in that time slot. I don't feel like outside of that game, who else have they played that's worth a crap? They lost to Notre Dame, and a week later, Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois at home. They were in a dogfight with Bowling Green, like I said. Arkansas, like I said. LSU gifted them 3 turnovers. How about this? Here's something I didn't know until today. A&M hasn't faced a dominant defense and not a single one ranked inside the top 20 all season long since the opener against Notre Dame. Remember, Notre Dame held them to under 250 yards. Meanwhile, South Carolina, we talk about how bad the offense struggles at times. They have played 3 top 20 offenses by this metric in 3 straight games. And they've arguably had their best offensive performances, in my opinion, from an efficiency standpoint and taking steps in getting better at things that they were really bad at the start of the year. A&M's defense is legit, right? But from a net yards per play perspective, South Carolina ranks barely behind A&M by like a quarter of a yard. And they have gone up against the 3rd hardest strength of schedule, according to this metric, in the country, whereas I think A&M is like 53rd. Last but not least, let's not forget that in those games I just mentioned, right? They beat Bowling Green at home by 6. They lost the total yardage battle, right? They had less total offensive yards than Mississippi State, LSU, and Arkansas. All 3 of those games. Those are the last 3 games they played. They got outgained in all of those games, but they were +5 in the turnovers. You've got to figure out a way to protect Lenora Sellers' blindside or figure out a way to game plan and scheme around it or go right at it, run right at them. A lot of times, like you will see offensive coordinators run right at a defensive end if it's a elite pass rushing defensive end. Now, Scorton is a good run stopper as well, but there's one way to take him out of the game as a pass rusher is run the ball right at him. You've got to figure out a way to loosen up this defense, take some shots deep, all that kind of stuff. It starts up front. It's, the oldest cliche in the book, but these games in the SEC are won and lost in the trenches. Josiah Thompson has a chance to really, really grow up as a player on Saturday. And so does this offensive line. You got to think at some point it can only get better. It can't get much worse. And A&M is a really good physical front four. They don't blow you away in terms of total sacks in the season. They do get in the backfield a lot. But Dowell Loggins over the last several weeks, Oklahoma has an elite defense, by the way. Like statistically, you saw what he did scheming up against them, especially when they had to, because that game was over in the first 9 minutes. You saw what they did against Alabama. On both sides of the ball. Alabama took no deep shots, tried to run the football all over South Carolina. That was like their MO after what happened against Vandy. They held Bama to 38 carries on 104 yards. So in the trenches, and specifically Nick Scorton versus Josiah Thompson, he has got to have the best game he's had all season long. We talk about Sellers playing the best game of his year. Josiah Thompson, true freshman, he has got to have the best game of his life and of his season this Saturday. That is your first matchup. Before we get into the next two, as well as two players and one bowl prediction, let's talk real quick about our good friends at FanDuel one more time. We've been doing better with the bets, guys. We've been doing a lot better with the bets, and FanDuel is always doing a fantastic job with the bets. And especially right now, as I said to you at the top of the show, if you are a new customer at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, go sign up. Place one $5 bet, and if you win that $5 bet, you get $150 for free. On tomorrow's show, I will tell you the locks of the week, which is, I think, 7-2 on the year now. It's an SEC game. It's a former SEC East rival, but I'm telling you right now, we can win that $150 together. We don't have to split it or anything like that. I'm just trying to help you, all right? That being said, get on over to FanDuel today, place one $5 bet, and win $150 in bonus bets right off the bat. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you could possibly want or need to place live bets on NFL action all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of a game, maybe it's tonight, when you're watching the Jets and Texans, you get a hunch in the middle of the game, check the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right. When we come back, we're going to continue on with our matchups and key matchups for the game on Saturday against A&M. Locked On Gamecocks continues next, guys. All right. Your second key matchup. I've said over and over again that A&M is going to try to run the football, and they are. They are. That is their identity. That's what they do best. And Wegman's had some good games. Marcel Reed was like 2 for 2 for 70 yards in the last game. That's not sustainable, especially against the secondary. They are going to take some shots, and they are going to try to move the ball like through the air at times against anyone, including South Carolina. Now, that plays into South Carolina's biggest strength, in my opinion, because that allows you to get your edge rushers up the field, rushing the quarterback, and then it also allows arguably the best secondary in the SEC to go pick you apart, pick you off, and maybe turn an interception into 6 points, as they've done multiple times. Now, here's the one thing that A&M has that a lot of other teams don't have. Noah Thomas. He is 6'6". He's a physical and matchup nightmare, and he's a guy that will get plays and yards in chunks and in big moments. He's a guy that they often look to on third downs. I thought going into the season, it was going to be Moose Muhammad as their go-to guy. I think he's a senior coming in too. It has not been. Noah Thomas, 6'6", like I said, matchup nightmare. O'Donnell Fortune, you're up, man. You have been one of the most what's the best way I want to put this? Like, I wouldn't say underrated, just not talked about nearly enough players in the country. Constantly overlooked. I forgot exactly what the stat was, but PFF threw out something on Twitter the other day, and it's like he is either the highest rated defensive back over the last month of the season in the SEC or the country, or like he has played his best ball against the best teams on the schedule so far. He's going to have to do that again against a dude that is, he's going to be giving up at least 5 inches to. So if you can figure out a way to stop that kid, especially on third downs, and allow your safeties, who are the best part of that secondary, to be physical, also play down in the box, because that's the other part too, is you're not going to be playing like any two high safety, single high safety, any of that. You might play single high, but those safeties are going to start creeping down into the box to help stop the run, guaranteed. So there's going to be times you're going to be put on an island, especially against a guy that's that size. You got to figure out a way to make sure he doesn't beat you. He had one catch against LSU for 54 yards. His other games, listen, against Arkansas, 6 catches, 109 yards, and a touchdown. Best game of the year. Mizzou, 3 catches for 65 yards. That's almost a 22 yards per catch. And then Mississippi State, 2 catches for 37 yards and a touchdown. The stats aren't going to blow you away. 22 catches, 343 yards, right around almost 16 yards per catch, and 3 total touchdowns. Let's keep that number the same. Let's just keep that number the same. And again, you cannot be giving up any chunk plays in between the 20s either, because once A&M gets into the red zone, they have been lethal. Top 3 or 4 in the country in red zone conversions. Got to figure out a way to take away their only non-running threat through the air. And I think South Carolina will be up to the task on that. Okay, your last matchup, and you guys know me well enough by now to know that I cheated. I copped out, and instead of putting 1, I put 2. And here's why. You got to figure out someone who is going to be a difference maker in the passing game, like catching the football. Over the last several weeks, you have seen Joshua Simon be the go-to, not threat, but the most targeted player on the team, right? He leads the team in total targets this season. You've seen his production go up over the last several weeks. They've opened several games with getting him out into the flat and getting a little dump off pass to him for 3, 4, 5, 6 yards. Fine with all that. But you're going to have to figure out someone, whether it's Jared Brown coming back from injury, Vandravius Jacobs, Nick Harbor, who's been way more involved in the passing game lately. Des Ricks has had a really, really good freshman season at cornerback for A&M. Former 5-star kid. Eli Ricks, his brother, played at LSU and then Alabama. Left early to get drafted. I think he went undrafted in the NFL now. Des Ricks, former 5-star, went to Bama. As soon as Saban left, he left. Went to A&M. He's started since day one. Been very good. Listen, LSU beat themselves a lot of times with their receivers dropping passes like on Saturday night. You can't do that. Absolutely cannot have that happen. You have got to take advantage of every opportunity against this defense. That being said, figure out someone or a handful of them to make 3, 4, 5 chunk plays. That's it. Flip field, get into field goal range, get out of your own, the shadows of your own end zone, whatever it is, and keep that defense from being able to come down into the box and crowd the line of scrimmage and take away the run. It'll be huge. And Sellers has been much, much better over the last several weeks against good defenses. He's played arguably his best ball over those weeks. I'm trying to look at the numbers real quick here because, like I said, on the season, 63% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, only 6.9 yards per attempt. However, you look at the actual game log, his last 2 games, accuracy has been his biggest downfall all season long. Even dating back to last year in limited action. Last 2 weeks against Bama and Oklahoma, he has completed 70% of his passes for over 400 combined yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. I can live with that. I can absolutely live with that. The biggest thing out of all that, like I just told you, only 1 turnover. You had a string of 4 straight games where he had at least 1 turnover. He has not done that over the last couple of games. He's got to continue with that. So, and last but not least, the other key matchup, I think, this week, Marcel Reed, the dual threat quarterback, I think he's going to start. I don't know why he wouldn't. And it really is your entire linebacking core. You could even make the case for some of the guys in the defensive ends and edge rushers, setting the edge there, not, getting too far upfield, getting their eyes in the wrong places, seeing the wrong things on, QB runs, RPOs, any of that stuff. And we've seen at times Kennard has been a little bit over aggressive on stuff like that. Dylan Stewart, true freshman, maybe that happens. But a player that has really, really started to play his best football over the last month of the season, Demetrius Knight Jr. And I was excited about this kid just going into the season because of he's going to end up making a lot of money at the combine. His size, he runs I think he hit 22 or 23 miles an hour this summer during workouts. He's huge, he's fast, he doesn't miss a lot of tackles, and he is a sideline guy. You're going to need someone to track this kid down because he's an excellent runner, underrated thrower, but he's an excellent runner, as you saw last week. Whit Weeks for LSU had been playing his best ball as well and looked lost all weekend against A&M. I don't think that Carolina will be unprepared for this at all. I think they will know exactly what to expect, and I don't think that A&M's dumb enough to start Connor Wigman. So Demetrius Knight, obviously Debo Williams, some of those other linebackers and defensive backs that are going to creep down into that box, you have got to figure out a way to make sure you have no missed tackles and allowing A&M any kind of broken plays, missed assignments that allow them to get a lot of yards. Because the closer they get to that end zone, it sounds stupid, but the closer they get to your goal line, the more efficient and effective they are. So those are your key matchups for players. We will continue on and give you two key players I think that are going to have to be difference makers and key matchups for South Carolina specifically, and one bold prediction. Before we do that, I want to talk to you about one other friend. It's my only other friend, guys, and that's 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy, good to have them back. Listen, if you are constantly on the go or you are constantly working, moving, you've got appointments all day, you got to take the kids to whatever, and life just seems to constantly be busy as can be, let me introduce you to one of my good friends, and that is 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy is so convenient, it's portable, and it gives you so much healthy energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans just like us. The fans who are first in the parking lots and who are last to leave, which is everyone outside of Williams-Brice because it's impossible to leave and get out of there. But we see you. Listen, make sure on Saturday when you are planning all the essentials of what you're going to need. You already talked about my key matchups, the keys to winning. One of the keys to winning for fans this weekend is going to be having a 5 Hour Energy at your disposal. They know that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide. All right, when we return, we're going to close out the show real quick with a few more notes, matchups, and one bold prediction before we get into our score prediction tomorrow on Friday. Locked on Gamecocks continues right after this. All right, so two key matchups, two key stats, whatever you want to say. We've talked about the turnovers over and over and over again, and they are very, very important. Talked about other player matchups that I think are also important. Here's something we haven't really talked about, and that is how good Kai Kroger's been all season long. Haven't seen that moment yet where he has one of his patented fake punt passes where I think he came into the season 7 of 8 in his career. Haven't seen that out of him. Hopefully we don't have to see it out of him on Saturday. Hopefully Carolina's game plan is good enough to just go beat him straight up. But field position will be key and crucial for this game. You cannot be backed up deep in your own end zone and deep in your own territory repeatedly. That has not been a recipe for success for this offense. And I tell you what, if you can figure out a way to flip that, get some short field like they did against Bama, obviously they did against Oklahoma, you can put this team away early and shock them. And this can be exactly what we saw in late November in 2022 against Tennessee. It can be that exact blueprint. This team at A&M is not as good as that 2022 Tennessee team. They're not. They've had a great start to the season, and that 0 in the loss column looks fantastic on paper, on the computer, whatever. I still don't think this is a top 3 team in the SEC. I think they still end up with at least 3 total losses. Does that start on Saturday? We'll see. All right, one more stat for you before tomorrow and before we end the show and get into tomorrow's episode. Just trying to build a little confidence for the fans here. Listen, we all know that Carolina could easily be 4-1 in the SEC. We've talked about that over and over and over again. Told you some of the numbers earlier about who they've played and their resume, all that kind of stuff. Here's one notable nugget that I did not know until today. How about the fact that excluding the COVID season, South Carolina is 12-5-1 against the spread at home against top 10 opponents in the last 19 years. They're also covering those games by like nearly 7 points. That means in 18 games at home against top 10 opponents, they're 12-5-1 against the spread with 7 outright victories as a underdog or small favorite. The path is there. This program has done this before. They've done it recently. They have done it multiple times, especially in Williams-Brice Stadium. The path is there. I know the fan base believes. I know this team believes. Listen, all I'm asking is when you go out there on Saturday and don't have a repeat of what happened against Ole Miss, don't give the game away in the first 10 minutes. Make them earn it. Make them earn it. You were never supposed to win this game. You were never supposed to win this game. You can, and I think you could. I think you will. Now, one bold prediction I'm going to give you. Lenore Sellers ends up with more passing yards than A&M's quarterback. And that may not sound like a crazy take. You think about Lenore Sellers in the passing game this season, that would be very, very big. And if he does do that, what that also means is you've hit on some deep balls, you've hit on some deep shots, you've been able to stretch this defense out, and you've made them play left-handed because, listen, Connor Wegman against Mizzou was like 18-22 for 270 yards or something like that. No one is going to do that against South Carolina. No one, right? They know they can't throw the ball with either quarterback effectively on this defense. They know that. They're going to be a one-dimensional offense if you do just the what your defense has done all season long. Make them play left-handed, make them uncomfortable early and often. And really, the big thing is, listen, the thing that gave them the most confidence against LSU, you got 3 turnovers inside of LSU's territory, for one. And then 2, you brought in a backup QB off the bench that no one thought was going to be coming in the game. And he has maybe the game of his life, the second half of his life, right? That's not a repeatable thing this week. Carolina, Clayton White, everyone on that defense well aware who Marcel Reed is. So now you don't have the element of surprise. You don't have the ability to come out there and run plays that no one saw all week in practice and walkthroughs and whatever against the scout team because Brian Kelly didn't run it for some reason. All that's gone. You got to line up and beat Carolina straight up. Is A&M good enough to do that? I don't know. They beat Bowling Green by 6. They beat Arkansas by 4. Don't give them 3 turnovers and don't let them get in the red zone over and over and over again. It's pretty simple stuff, guys. All right, I'm fired up. Can't wait. We will be back tomorrow early with a good show for you and score predictions as well. Send me your score predictions on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. We appreciate it. Go leave a 5-star review. That also helps as well. All right, we will see y'all tomorrow. Y'all have a great rest of your Thursday. Go Cox.